I was really struck this morning, I guess Jeff is gone now, but the story we heard from Jeff Scaffelstead is so similar to what you're going to hear from the folks at Vermont Field Naturalists. And I knew Jeff, I worked with it, it was biology class, and I had no idea that Greg had that relationship to him. And it's making me wonder how many more stories like that there are that we haven't tapped into yet. I've been Zooming or teaming with the alumni and leadership of the Vermont Field Naturalist Program, and it was kind of relieving for me because, like probably many of us, I've been kind of confused and couldn't understand Greg's extreme emphasis on a very small geographic piece of the world. But then I hear a story like Jeff's or what you're about to hear about the Vermont Field Naturalists, and the conclusion for me is you can tend your own garden and still have amazing influence on the world. The real title of my talk is Promulgating Peripheral Vision. I didn't get into the schedule here, and I'll explain the promulgating part a little later. I came to Alaska in '77, headed right for the end of the road. I've been here ever since in the land of Ocontacoo Quans. I get to Glacier Bay about once a year on average. And I first met Greg at the 1983 symposium, which I had to get dragged to because I didn't have a clue what was going to happen there. Somebody told me if I was serious about being a naturalist, I really needed to come to that thing. And like a lot of people, that was kind of the beginning of a whole new way of life for me. I began teaching and guiding and consulting with Greg and another early mentor, Dan Bishop, the hydrologist. Those guys were buddies, so sometimes I worked with both of them. And favorite place for the last 5 years, it's got to be what I call Goatlandia, the range of 100 or so Janwu mountain goats above our home on Santa Kahini, Creek of the Little Flounders. This is a science symposium, and I'm not a scientist, but our organizers wanted to conclude with some thoughts about what Greg brought to science by finishing with natural historians. In most of the world, scientists probably think of naturalists as a bunch of unlettered and undisciplined daisy pickers. But that isn't true here. I haven't heard anybody say that here. And the reason, of course, is Greg Strebler. For each of you long-timers, Greg magnified the power of your science with an exasperatingly omnidisciplinary context. No smart specialist worked here without collaborating or at least sparring with Greg. He's gone, but there are a lot of good naturalists still here, and there's still a program you'll hear about from my esteemed daisy picker colleagues that's still cranking out young naturalists. One of whom, if we're lucky, might be the Strebler of this century. Oop. Presenters were asked to put on their Strebler caps. What would Greg do with these 9 minutes? And I think a lot of us started by going back to what he did say at previous symposia. For the second one, he gave a pretty biting commentary on science in the park. he went into Doris Howe's collection of reports and found only about 10% that were actually used in management. That rate's probably gone up because after that, the marine studies really took off. And as a quote-unquote researcher, I'm probably among the guilty 90%. I cannot think how a manager might use my work with Lawrence and Noble and Pohl on successional aftermath of beetle kill. But I think Greg would give a big thumbs up to our Bosworth Botanical crew, who is wrapping up 5 days of working with the park on a proposed boardwalk through the cut of Bartlett River. It's, you know, that's a real management issue. We, as long-timers, that team you just saw there, plus me, is about 200 years of ground time in Flinkitani. So we bring some historical context. And I think I know what Dave Bone would say about boardwalks. Now, my opinion is pretty lightweight compared to Bone's. But what we can do, Bosworth Botanical, is get out there and take pictures and share with people how amazing it is to see brown and black bear tracks side by side in the mud and baby moose tracks the size of deer. And up in the woods, otter, coyote, these sap licking stations that Chris Fasty first told me about out at Muir Point. Scientists naturalists are looking for stuff that falls through cracks between scientific disciplines. Like, what was the name of Muir Point before important white guys got here? Which brings us to the 4th Science Symposium and Greg's notorious Peripheral Vision as an adjunct to Rigor at one-pager in the symposium proceedings that I then stole another decade later for a presentation to a bunch of wildlife biologists. So I have a little head start on the question, what would Greg be saying for the 5th? The Stredler liked big, unusual words, and they just flowed out of him, sometimes 2 in a row, with no apparent forethought or searching. It pissed me off. I have to spend all night with an online thesaurus search to come up with words like that. But I thought about that when adding yet another big word to the front of peripheral vision. Promulgate is to make something known, but there's kind of an institutional and even pious flavor to it. Now, Greg was, of course, a maverick, but kind of a religious maverick, and definitely a judgmental one. Peripheral vision is almost anti-institution, but in a devotional way. We all wish institutions were better at it. So let's get out there and do some promulgating. How do you become a nature studies generalist? Where's Merle? This is what Merle and I do for a living. A peripheral visionary. Well, we got to define vision. It's not just disciplinary, it has a time dimension too. Yesterday, tomorrow, deep past, and at least 7 generations out. This is all from Strevler and Eichenlaub, and all of the shoulders that they stood on. Fascists hate ice ages and evolution. Because like folk singer guitars, they're whimsical and dangerous to humorless hypotheses. In the 80s, Greg told us to turn on the projector, ecologically speaking. At the time, he was helping Bishop and Armstrong and me roll the projector forward to think about what would happen when the airport built yet another impediment to tidal flow and critter movements. As a consultant with Bambi-hugging proclivities, you silently, or sometimes noisily, hope these things won't happen.
Yeah.
But they do. And the more you live through, the more vulgar they feel. I took the projector dictum seriously. Before cameras, this is how my frames looked. This is what happened with beetles. And today I call them page flippers. This is from our study last year of a proposed trail through the Notch. 97, and then this just changes everything with LiDAR stuff. Wrapping up my talk to the wildlife biologist when I ripped off Peripheral Vision, I came up with 3 recommendations, and I still like them. The first one is make maps. Learn GIS. Don't relegate it to your 40-year-old whippersnapper associate. It's like making secretaries type your papers for you. Keep a journal. Make it so much fun you wouldn't think of neglecting it. Take a class from Kathy Hocker. And befriend a naturalist. For those of you who've been coming here going on half a century, you've become naturalists against your best intentions, so this may not apply. But for those of you who are younger or got turned down by field naturalists, cozy up to one. As a scientist, you have a lot to offer naturalists. Just remember, it's a two-way street. Even if they're not Greg Strebler, they're going to notice stuff that you don't. We're all here because of Greg, but maybe, and he would say, more so because of this place, Glacier Bay. Most of you, like Greg, probably feel a little religious about this place, and it doesn't hurt your science. But it's worth remembering that Satiti Gay, the bay replacing the glacier, is basically, ecologically, a big vacant lot. It's a glorious disturbed area, but compared to where I live, it's just a baby landscape. Let me give you an example. A couple years ago, I was remeasuring vegetation plots at the 1857 surface age with a couple of senior ecologists who had deep history here, but only here. They called me over to look at this weird bush they'd never seen. Rosie Manzizia, after blueberry, is the second commonest bush in the old growth of the archipelago. So if you're an ecologist who can't identify Rhododendron manzizii, formerly Manzizia ferruginea, you need a naturalist. And no, that app on your phone is not a naturalist. A naturalist zooms in and out in space and time, from geology to pollination. And what we learn hurts. Most of us who live in Hlikitani are at times desperate watching the loss of forests mowed down by ecologically illiterate managers. And coming to Glacier Bay for us is kind of a letting go of that. It's really cool to see what nature can do in a mere 2 centuries. So, gonna sheesh Glacier Bay for feeding our stomachs and our hearts, and for bringing us together. Rooms like this, it doesn't happen anywhere else I know. And thank you, Glacier Bay, for Greg, who had too big a soul to live and die anywhere else.